Hey all, Abe here. This is the new season of 1Upsmanship with Michael Swaim and Adam Ganser. And if you're wondering how to get more episodes, this month kicks off the new season of 1Ups on the Small Beans Patreon channel. 2 new episodes each month for the price of a coffee. No ads, just beans, baby. Patreon.com/smallbeans.
Hey, listen!
Technically, this is I think my first podcast back since I graduated.
I'm so glad
from
you're back,
my program. I'm back, baby. Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, back, baby. The graduate is here.
I'm a new man. It's like a meteorite struck from Earth, and it cracked open, and Swaim walked out covered in goo and ready to pod.
What an image!
But,
what an image!
Yeah, because this is the pod where. Hi, folks. It's 1Upsmanship. Michael Swaim and Adam Ganser, 2 pals who talk about video games.
Welcome.
I do a pod about trauma, grief, and depression, and as Adam knows, I like to destigmatize mental health challenges. I talk about it a lot. I'm very brazen about it because I think our society is like too buttoned up about it, and it's something I struggle with, and I know a lot of people feel like shame talking about, blah, 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 blah. But usually I try to confine it to the pod that's about that. I feel like 1Upsmanship is the only podcast we do where eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed towards the end of my time before I took this break that I was starting to lose it. Specifically, if you heard the at the end of the the Assassin's Creed Origins episode, I got real bitchy in a way that I normally am not, and weird. I don't know if you edited around.
I cut some of that out though. I cut a lot of that out. And then the
Mega Man X one, obviously, I talked about one of my episodes.
Yeah.
And I think Sean was like,
you did.
This got very dark for a video games podcast. But there probably won't be much of that. Because who
knows?
Sitting in awe and gratitude of my time with you right now.
And man, we exchanged really sweet emails this yesterday about this. I never mentioned to the audience exactly what was going on, so just a quick recap. So you took a mental health break, and as a result, we've recorded something like 6 episodes. I don't remember exactly how many where you were not here. This is the first one we're recording where you're back. And as I said to you when because we did a few during your time,
notice as much.
Yeah, I don't know when this will release. It might release after all of those. There might still be some that we don't release till after. But there's just nothing like my Swammy boy. There's just nothing like a Swammy boy. I'm so glad you're back.
I don't know which one of us is chocolate
so
and
glad.
Which one's peanut butter, but that's certainly the dynamic we're dealing
But
with.
we are tasty. Yeah, we are a tasty duo. So we're doing kind of a fun, sort of more personal, reflective episode today, Shipheads, in honor of having graduated from the difficult stretch we were in, and looking back on the things we've learned. Today's episode is about games that formed and shaped our point of view and taste in what games should be.
Well, that's right. We talk a lot of shit here about... Well, we both sort of take the stance. I think I take the stance that my opinions are important or somehow meaningful, and you take stance that your opinions are objectively correct, which is they're slight shades of both different kinds of arrogance. And
I do.
We
right.
wouldn't be doing a pop culture pod if we didn't think our opinions on pop culture matter.
Exactly.
But we have very different tastes. It's one of the delightful things here because art is subjective. A review is a subjective act, and we hold that view. So I feel like this is a great one to really dial in. This is almost should be the first episode, but I'm too lazy to go back and put it in that order. But you're really going to find out which games we played when we were the formative age and carried with us and are like, now that's what makes a good game, and it'll probably help you figure out which of us or what parts of us you vibe with the most better than ever before, which hopefully will make the podcast even more useful to you in the future.
Hopefully, or at least you'll know which of us you don't need to listen to anymore.
Get that 15 seconds
Maybe
forward
both.
button ready to smash.
Yeah. That's correct. So I just want to be clear. This list, for me at least, is not a list of great games necessarily. This is a list of games that were important in developing how I feel about video games.
Okay, yes.
And so they're not all good in this.
Not objectively good, but there's something that appealed to you, right? Like it's not games you didn't like, or they presumably wouldn't. Have, blah blah blah. Great.
100%. But I did go in some weird directions here because I had to really think about. I had to think about where did I first get excited about that idea. So it's a weird list. I'll just put it to you that way. I'm just putting that out there ahead of time. We each have 10. So what say we, as is our custom, as is our tradition, we serpentine through and take a break after the 8.
Sounds good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I also want to say that... No, I'll save that. Okay. Yeah, let's go for it. 10's a lot. We got to speed up.
Okay. Rad. Yeah, and I do have some extras. So I have like one or two very brief caveats, as is our other tradition. And the first one is, I could just take all of the Super Mario games and say it's those. And I think that would make a boring podcast. So I think I'm just going to ask that you guys, and you specifically, Mike, understand that there is no more formative game franchise for me at every iteration
Zelda
of gaming
Metroid?
than Mario.
And Halo? All your biggies?
I still think
but Mario
those are all important, and they may pop up. But I think Mario is the first big game for me.
It's the prime video game.
Yes, for me that's the one. In fact, it's the first one I ever played.
Maybe 3D
the very first video game.
I'd have to go back and check the records, Your Honor. But I've gotten the anecdotal notion that you're not like huge into platformers or 3D platformers. Like you play them and go, that was good. But I don't remember you ever flipping out about one. Yeah.
I don't love them all. Love them all, but I've played more than you think.
If Mario's your primary, it seems to speak to a deep, abiding love of jumping. Yeah.
and the platforms it lands on. You'd think. But I just want to say, because otherwise I feel like there'd be too many Marios on here.
Okay.
Yeah, there's going to be shooting ones. Fear not. Fear not. So, I mean, some of these will not be a surprise, but some of them will. So I'm going to lead off with my number 10. In a game that I believe will be a surprise, which is Super Track and Field.
So, yeah,
Super
I'm
Track
usually
and Field.
the guy who tries to be weird, and I can't tell sometimes if it's for hipster cred or if it's my genuinely held opinion. I think it's the latter. I fear it's the former, of course. But I've never heard Adam have a weird list.
Sure.
This is thrilling. That is such a bizarre choice. Explain.
Yeah, I know it is. Thank you. So Super Track and Field was a bundled game that came with the Nintendo Entertainment System. If you bought it from whatever years, like there was a certain period of time where they were selling a 3-part game. The first part was Super Mario Brothers. Obviously, that's the big one. The second part was Duck Hunt, which was a great game, and I played a lot of it. But the third one was this game called Super Track and Field, which was definitely just sort of jammed in there. And it came with a video game accessory called the Power Pad. And the Power Pad was basically a gigantic sort of vinyl, I guess, pad that you plugged in. It was an early
Dance Revolution pad, essentially.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And what you were supposed to do is, they had little spots where they had sensors or whatever that were like buttons. And you were supposed to actually step on the buttons to simulate running and jumping and stuff. And you're playing track and field games, right? Now, I was 5 years old when this came out, or when I got this. I don't know when it came out. And I mention it because 2 incredible things happened that I think are very video gamey. The first is it was extremely difficult to get a full play session of Super Track and Field because I had siblings. And so siblings meant that we never were able to really sit down and understand this video game. So we're constantly fighting to finish a full playthrough of Super Track and Field. It was not as much a problem with Mario or with Duck Hunt because those games were a little more engaging visually. So a sibling could stand not playing it and just watching it. Super Track and Field was not fun to watch as much. So we were constantly fighting over playing. And one of us, I'm not going to say which one, me, figured out that you don't actually have to run on the buttons. You can kneel down and press them. And so we started cheating on this game to create like long jumps of like 100 yards and stuff. You know what I mean? Because you just like take your feet off the thing and then it keeps jumping, right? So like this is the game that taught me that you're always playing a video game to number one, like you gotta take your video game time where you can get it, and number two, there's always a way to cheat the game. Like playing it the way it's intended, not always the best way to play it, and that's like a primary truth for all video gamers, and I learned it here at age 5.
Great number
That's
10.
my number 10.
Have to mention a couple things that came up for me.
Great.
One is watching a dude at DDR play, because DDR would have the side-by-side, the twofer usually, so you could compete with your friends.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the top of its
That's right.
craze, when I love that there's younger people that listen to this, because I bet they don't know this shit, and it would blow my mind if I were them. That was the game I mained for a long time with my buddy Griffin Rowell, and we would go stand in line. Like, it really had an arcade craze moment where there were long, long lines to play DDR, and people were competitive, and I got good at it.
Yep.
But then there was this dude who would go to our arcade and play both at once on his handstand the whole time. And we're like, well, that's that. Like, we're done with this. It's the equivalent of, it was the early version of
He
logging
owns
on
this
to
now.
a massively multiplayer game and getting killed by an 8-year-old in Korea and going, oh, I didn't know that I was that bad. Because I was only
Yeah,
comparing
it's
to
over
my
for
brother
me.
ever.
Yeah, it's over for me.
And my close friends. And then the other thing was,
Right.
Sega, as ever, to some degree, the bargain version of Nintendo, had a thing around the similar time that is my most disappointing Christmas present I ever had. It was called the something ring, active ring or something. And it was a ring on the floor that was basically a grocery scanner, infrared lights pointing up.
Yeah.
The commercial
Yeah, I
was
remember
a
this.
kid playing Mortal Kombat by punching and kicking, or Street Fighter or something. And when I got it and set it up, I realized how it worked is, each thing is mapped to a button on the controller, and you do it by interrupting the infrared on the correct side at the correct height. So it's like playing a goddamn theremin. So it's like to press C, duck down and interrupt the front left infrared sensor with your hand. And I'm like, so you end up just painfully squatting, ducking your hands in and out. Terrible, just terrible. One of the worst things ever released.
But you end up playing it like a Simon Says, right?
Exactly.
Like
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Total. The commercial is just a total lie. And then it's funny to me that cheating in our day was like a controller that would just spam the pause button to fake slow motion, or the Game Shark, which when I was 8 seemed like pornography. Like, I thought it was a bad
Game
thing you
Shark.
weren't supposed to have.
Yeah.
It was a thing you could plug your games
Yeah.
into, and it would break the code and let you fuck with them.
Game Shark had ads on television, and it was like, it very much felt like you said, very illicit.
Girls Gone Wild
Like, it was
ads and then Game Shark.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because it was paired with those things. That's right. Anyway, that was my number 10. What's yours, sir?
I took a little time because I can make it up in the air.
Okay.
I don't have much to say about my picks other than my caveats
All right.
are,
No problem.
I actually stacked them somewhat in genre order and somewhat in order of how much I think, looking back, they influenced my taste in games, and also somewhat in order of like the ones you've heard of. It all just kind of worked out that way. So my number 10 is one I'm pretty sure you've heard of, if not played, Comix Zone. Comics with an X.
I played a little bit of that.
It's a beat 'em up, which is no longer, I find them shallow now. Like, I got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collection. I've been playing through it, and I'm like,
Same.
it's just not my favorite genre. We've sophisticated out of it. It doesn't hold my interest anymore. But I think it's important because there's a time in my life where it was my primary game input between X-Men and TMNT and Avengers games and the Simpsons game and things like Comix Zone. And Pit Fighter and stuff like that. So,
Double Dragon.
walking around, punching and kicking stuff. And for my money, Comix Zone was the coolest one I ever encountered. It's a guy who gets sucked into his own comic, which is hokey as shit. But by cool, I mean the design looked cool. It looked really animated. It was a really meaty, punchy thing, and it actually took place on the comic book page, and you would flip from panel to panel and decide your path through the page by picking which panel. You would rip the paper apart and dive through it and shit, and I just found that so cool. And it's extreme. I'm not going to put Sonic the Hedgehog on here because honestly, I like Sonic the Hedgehog as a game, but I don't think it influenced my taste that much. But Comix Zone did, because along the vein, the reason I mentioned Sonic is Comix Zone encapsulates what, when I was 7, 8, I thought being cool was, and it's a very special kind of cool that was specific to the 90s that is now a trope of the 90s, and I think will stand as one of the, the extreme. Oh yeah, that was what the branding told us was cool in the 90s. It's like a little time capsule. Comix Zone is there for that reason, and for the beat 'em up reason.
You're not acknowledging, in my mind, you're not acknowledging the fact that, but it also has a thing that I think is quintessentially Swaim, which is it has a high concept. It has a meta concept about it.
Oh yeah, almost all of mine are.
You love that stuff.
The concept tickled my brain as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. You love that stuff. It makes perfect sense. And I promise I'm not trying to be argumentative when I point this out. I just want to point out your game of the year last year was Sifu, which is a beat 'em up.
Dude, I started training again. I've never gotten past the third level, and it was my game of the year. I've been playing daily like a routine to try.
Really?
I want to get through to the end. Yeah.
You really are a new man. You really are covered in primordial goo. I love it.
Well, it's meditative.
I love what I'm hearing here.
Instead of frustrating.
Yeah, sure. Well, our serpentine requires that you now say your 9th, sir.
That's right. Rest in peace, Uncle John Swaim, my most fun uncle. So fun that he drank to excess and ate tons of red meat and smoked cigars every day and died young of pancreatic cancer, because that's how that story goes. But goddamn, was he fun. He was the richest in my family when I was growing up. So on the weekends, a lot. We would go to his house, which now I see as like an upper middle class tract home, but it felt like a mansion to me. He had a pool, he had a barbecue, right? He had a giant Laserdisc collection, and he had a game that I only found there, and I actually constantly looked for it at my GameStop in the local mall. Never found it for the Genesis, but he had a copy, and I was obsessed with it, and it was called Starflight, and it's the oldest. Well, that's not true, because Escape Velocity is a primitive version of this and a great game for the Mac. But Starflight was the first console and more complex with full graphics and shit space sim, which is still, I've never played the perfect one. They all have their pros and cons, but I'm obsessed with them because I'm obsessed with Star Trek. And I can't, one day, it's like the dragon I'll always chase. In my life is the perfect space sim that I could play for years and years and years. But Starflight started that love off. It was you started in a space station docked around Earth. You picked your crew, you picked their specializations, you allocated them points RPG style. You went around the galaxy discovering new planets and systems. There was real gravity. You had to go into orbit, scan stuff from orbit, drop a mining drone, and then you drive the drone around and mine for minerals. You'd trade the minerals, meet aliens, do diplomatic relationships, upgrade your weapons, blah, 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 like modern space sim.
It's pretty advanced.
It had all the elements and was really complex for the time, for the Sega Genesis. And yet,
interesting.
Just through everything being simple. Like you could compare it to, if you're familiar with Dwarf Fortress, it's all just clip art, but the systems are just math, and the people poured time into the math, and that's why I was like, the depth of this is astounding to me. Starflight.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I can see that that's also a precursor for a lot of games that you love now.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. My 9th one, and I'm not going in chronological order, but these are both just really early.
Are you going in
games.
influence order?
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's also like I'm kind of feeling
it's a fuzzy thing, but you
rank.
Consciously ordered them in some way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing it now as we speak. I actually just have a pile, and I'm ordering it now. So my second one, and this is probably the most obscure game on here, is a game called Baseball Stars. In part because it was a game that both my brother and I could play. It came out for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And it has two things that I think are really important in video games, and it was my first time. The first is it had a create a player, a thing that I think all video games need. You know what I mean? Like, I think actually a lot of the arguments, of course Mario doesn't need it, but there are any game where you're like doing any kind of RPG, anything kind of needs a create a player. And this is the first time I'd encountered that, and my brother and I would have a lot of fun making up stupid players for this baseball game. And the other thing that it has is that it essentially was the first time a sports game was also kind of like a role-playing game. Like it saved stats and stuff, meaning that it wasn't just playing an exhibition baseball game, like you're compiling stats toward a season and stuff, as I remember it. And that is a different experience than sports games were up to that point. Up to that point, the fun is let's play a football game that was sort of the video game version of going outside with your friends, right? This brought sports games and, games in general into let's actually have the narrative of a whole season. Like, let's make this a larger time investment and, give you the sort of joy of being a sports fan as a gamer. And I think that is crucial to all sports games, but also is sort of crucial to all role-playing games, right? Like, whenever you create a character, you're sort of telling the story of what happens to that character as you play it, right? You're creating that story. And a lot of games take away the options and limit it down to, specific outcomes, cough, cough, Mass Effect. But there are some games that are pretty wide open, and sports games as RPGs are pretty wide open. And that's the fun of them. And Baseball Stars was the first of that. So that's my number 9. And I think that probably ought to take us right into the break. What do you think, Swammy?
That works. For the record, at that time, of course, because I like twists, I was a Mutant League and NFL Blitz guy. NFL Blitz was straight, like it was football, but it was highly gamified arcade football. Yeah.
It was advertised as NBA Jam for football.
That's right.
And it was NBA Jam, by the way, great game. I was just a little old for it to really thrill me. And for whatever reason, my family really loved baseball. Kind of still does.
There's a friend of our family who's a programmer, and he's in the credits of NBA Jam, and that was so mind-blowing to me as a kid to see his name go by. Oh my God.
Like, wow. Yeah, totally. Credits were, in general, mind-blowing as a kid. Well, sit there and ruminate on the majesty of credits as a child while we go and have some advertisers splash these noises in front of your ears. See you soon.
We're back. More 1-ups.
Woo!
Shipheads, which we love to call you. If you're a Freedom fan, though, they call their fans piss pigs, so it could be worse. They're funny folks.
That's real good.
Over there at 3.
That's real good.
Anyway, enough advertising other podcasts I listen to. Is it my turn?
It's not, because per Serpentine rules,
I'm
I must
rusty
do my
on
number
the
8.
Serpentine. It's weird. Yeah,
that's okay.
Go for it. So
right.
We're talking formative games that shaped our taste. And Adam is bringing his number 8? Number 7?
I am.
Number 8. Yeah.
No, it's my number 8. This is number 8. Number 8 is the original Nintendo Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. Here's why. It sucks. It's not
hard.
a very good game.
Not for good reasons.
It's not a good game.
Just hard.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. And it was the first time as a kid and as a gamer that I realized a game could be punishing and mean. A thing that, like, some people realize that right away. I tend to have the quality of trying to see the best in the designer and developer until they force me not to. This game forced me not to. So, like, I never finished it. I actually picked it up and replayed it recently just to see, like, man, was I just terrible? No, it's just not very good. It's not a very good game. It's really hard and punishing, and I hate it. And I think that belongs on the list just for that reason. That's my 8.
But you must, I assume, and I just want to ask, you differentiate between that and like an Elden Ring, where the design choice is elegant and the difficulty is woven in a skillful way.
I mean, sometimes Elden Ring is cheap though. Like, let's just be
Okay,
clear. There
so
are
this
times
is-
that FromSoft.
So this was the beginning
cheap.
of your engagement with games where you're like, this game hates me. This game's trying to fuck with me. Yeah, which you
I
still
thought
have a
little-
fascination with.
That's right. And I have like an ego thing that's like, I'm not gonna quit.
Fuck you, fuck you.
Like, exactly.
That's the
like,
competition.
I was thinking about the Batman game, because the Batman game also had a couple levels like that, as I remember it. But Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was such a landmark for this game is hard and it sucks and I can't beat it. Yeah.
Did you play
So-
Pit
and gamers
Fighter,
do
by
that.
the way, speaking of beat 'em ups?
A little bit.
Okay,
A little
okay.
bit. Yeah.
You'd
I think
stack that cash
it wasn't
at
on
the end?
It wasn't on Nintendo, right? Wasn't it only on a
think it
Sega
was
system?
Yes, you'll notice themes in our totally
of
makes
course.
sense.
Yeah.
I owned a Sega and I didn't own both, and you owned a Nintendo and you didn't own both. Obviously going to
Correct.
affect our choices. Can't
Correct.
not. Time for my number 8, if I'm not misreading the conversational
That's right.
tone.
You're number
Okay.
8.
This is my only entry in the RPG category, and I was just
That's a
trying
surprise.
Octopath Traveler 2 over the last couple nights, and I gotta say, we're gonna get heat for this. I want to cover more sports games and RPGs, and I'm trying to have an open heart about that. But the last few I played, Persona 5 Royale, Octopath, just like turn-based RPGs, have also kind of lost their appeal to me. It feels shallow no matter how
Yep.
complex the menu is, to just click through a menu and watch an animation, no matter how spectacular the animation is. It feels too machiney to me these days, for whatever reason. But this is an RPG, and I loved RPGs for many years, and this one captured my imagination and my heart so much. It felt like a weirdly vulnerable, tender vibe. I wanted to play it alone all the time. I was fascinated with the love story in it, and it's called Lunar, Eternal Blue.
I think I've seen a little bit of this game.
It's the second. The first one
Yeah.
was Lunar Silver Star, and I loved
Okay.
both, but Eternal Blue was just where it was at. Ganon was, I believe, the name of the villain as well. But also there's like a Nala, maybe? No, Ruby? I don't know. You had a little flying cat friend, and you went on like floating. It was my first exposure to islands floating in the sky with castles on them. Just a lot of cool imagery. It was anime.
Such a staple.
And a lot of
Yeah, such a
staple anime imagery that introduced to me for the first time. My dad seeing me playing it, said, you guys should watch this movie, My Neighbor Totoro. So it led to that, which led to all the Miyazaki
That's cool.
films. So they're all kind of bundled up. And it was the first epic length game where it felt, it had an open world map. And I was like, I didn't realize a game could be 30, 40 hours long.
Yeah, it could be super
so much bang
long,
for my
right.
buck. I was playing
Right.
Yoshi's Story and beating it in 75 minutes and shit.
Right.
So yeah, Lunar Eternal Blue, my only classic RPG.
That's cool. By the way, on the RPG front, I feel like we can talk about covering these South Park games. Those are RPGs that are turn
The
based
first, yes,
that are good.
They're good and this doesn't mean bad, but they're highly simplified by modern
Yeah,
RPG
they are.
standards. But
Yes.
kept my interest the whole time because of the writing and everything. Yeah,
And they make the turn based stuff fun.
just complex enough to actually
Yeah.
to not be boring. But yeah.
So, you're number 7, sir.
Oh fuck! God, I'm bad.
know.
I hate
I know.
Serpentine. I'm really bad at it doesn't make sense to my brain. My number 7 is also technically an RPG, but I would.
Okay.
But this is my. So I guess JRPG, ERPG, right? Not ARPG. And if you're not familiar by that, I mean European style RPG, which is still turn based. Disco Elysium would be a recent, installment, but ARPG is like Zelda or any modern inheritor of that, where you run around and you press a button to slash, but you still upgrade. Anyway, Fallout 2, probably expected for me. I dearly hope we cover it someday, and I'll say much more there. But I believe that once Bethesda took it over, it's still good enough that I play every Fallout game. 76 kind of sucked, but I play every other Fallout game. And I'm still invested in the aesthetic. It does feel like it's become, it has stopped evolving. And I'm like, I get it. of this aesthetic that's shaped my pop culture taste so much. That's still, I can get full of it. I wish it changed more. Bethesda seems too scared to leave the formula, whatever. But Fallout 2 was the one right before they switched to the modern version of Fallout. Isometric, third person, above camera view, turn based with action points. So unlike JRPGs are known for the menu where you go, where you have MP and you use X amount of mana to do blah, blah, blah. ERPGs are usually known for using action points. They're more like a hex grid board game where, you pay 6 action points, you take cover, the cover makes it 50% less likely that a bullet will hit you. These kinds of mechanics. But mainly, the reason I'm into it was this was so, like maybe one of the most fascinating fictional worlds I'd encountered at that age ever. Retro future. What if the bombs fell and it was the post-apocalypse, but the ruins were all frozen in the cheerful vision of the future of the 1950s? Everyone knows the Fallout aesthetic, but it was a little more grounded and real here, a little more like a novel. That opening sequence, this was the first time I was exposed to "Give me a kiss to build a dream on" with war never changes. Yeah. Like that shit's so epic to a 10-year-old. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's great.
And it invented all the tropes of Fallout and took them a little more seriously than the modern Fallouts, which I enjoy. We'll say
I've never played Fallout 2.
Yeah.
I gotta play Fallout 2. I've never played it.
I hope we cover it eventually.
I do too. That would be a lot of fun. So, okay. That leads to my number 7. One that if I had to bet on one game that should be on Mike Swaim's list also, it would be this one. I don't know if it will be. But the game is Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat.
I wish I'd played it more than I did. Great game, but no, I didn't play it much.
I didn't play it that much either. Mortal Kombat was forbidden in my home. So
I self-forbid it. I thought it was bad. I made that decision to be a moral boy.
You felt the way my parents felt about it, which is essentially that this is grotesque and wrong. And
the first part is not inaccurate.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny now. You play it now and you're like, this is so dumb. And it definitely is. How do I say this? Like on a specific trajectory. And I think video game violence basically boils down into one of two trajectories. Either it's about violence for emotion's sake, or it's about violence for the gore joy's sake. And I would say that's where Mortal Kombat is headed, as is Doom, as is a lot of games. But Mortal Kombat is basically that moment where I discovered video games that were incredibly violent and gross and winking at you about it, and desperately wanted to play it. Like I really wanted to play it. Everybody went bananas for it when it came out. We used to, like, I never really was an arcade guy, but I found myself at the arcade quite a bit when Mortal Kombat came out. I learned how to use Shang Tsung when Mortal Kombat 2 came out because I loved it so much that I was like, I'm gonna be all players. I'm gonna do this. And I would go to the stupid arcade and waste tens of dollars in quarters playing Mortal Kombat because we couldn't buy it in my home or play it in my home. So I was willing to do a lot of extra work, a lot of extra chores around the house, mortgage my small child future just to play some Mortal Kombat. And Mortal Kombat was a huge moment for a sweet, innocent, young Christian lad like myself, where it was like, man, but evil's got some points. Evil's got some good points. So it belongs number 7. Didn't you loved Mortal Kombat, didn't you? Why am I the only one that loved it?
MK11's on the drive because I pulled so hard for it. I think Mortal Kombat as a series is important. I think camp is important. Like I wouldn't excise Arnold Schwarzenegger from the pop culture universe.
Right.
And it's sort of the video game equivalent. So you see it way more in the more recent ones where the campaign is basically a 3-hour movie of them being like, we can bring the same energy as the Mortal Kombat movie, that like goofy big energy. Like the game can bring it too. They make a little movie that's dumb as hell. And I do remember learning how to Shang Tsung controls and how to turn.
Of course, it was the best.
And it was a coveted thing to learn the inputs and memorize them like phone numbers. Like there were kids at school where you'd be like, how do you do the fatality where Lizard takes his head off and vomits acid and they dissolve? And they're like up, down, left, A, B, down. And like you had to know it by rote to do them. Some of them were printed on the arcade machine, but the kids who were serious about it would memorize a Rolodex of these things because you wanted to see them. You wanted to see the babalities, the friendships. When you found out, it was like schoolyard jokes. It was like the developers were in on stuff 11-year-olds like. Because they're
those
immature.
Dorks,
yeah. Because
those dorks that could memorize that were briefly cool. Yeah. Because they knew those combinations.
If you had only ever seen fatalities and they're like, if you do it this way, they hug. You're like, that's so dumb.
Like, what?
That's
oh
crazy.
My God.
I didn't know it did that.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly. They knew where they were. So no, I'm sorry, sir. I believe I still have one more to go for my 6th.
Every single time I'm going to fuck it up. Fair warning.
And I think it's going to be great every time. Okay, so number 6. These games, I think I'm actually gonna name 2 because they're stand-in for Mario 64. Mario 64 is the actual game that I felt this way, but I'm gonna use as a stand-in for them because I bought these around the same time. Wave Race 64 and Pilot Wings 64.
I almost put Wave. Isn't it Wave Runner? Wave Race? I almost put that on here. Yes,
it's Wave Race. So, and I believe it was called Wave Race 64, but I might be wrong. So these are 2 games that were basically launched around the same time as the Nintendo 64 to show off what the Nintendo 64 was capable of. Looking back on basically all the Nintendo 64 titles that don't have Zelda or Mario in the title, they're all a little janky. And they're all definitely like, they're new, like they have great moments, they have great ideas, some of them, but they're definitely the first of the 3D games, and they look like them and they play like them. Wave Race and Pilot Wings, though, to my young mind, seemed like, my God, reality is here. Like, that's how I felt when I played these games. And it's a thing that video games are constantly trying to create in kids, is that feeling like, oh my God, it looks so real. That's a huge video game thing. And it was never more potent for gamers, at least my age and around my age, than when we leapt into the third dimension and had games like Mario 64 and Wave Race and Pilot Wings. It really felt like, my God, we can do anything. Everything is possible. Wave Race is actually extremely difficult to play, as is Pilot Wings, but they both delivered things that we really wanted, but didn't realize we wanted. The freedom to go any direction. That's what Pilot Wings is offering, and it's really good at that. And Wave Race, it looked like real water. I remember saying that to my brother. It looks like real water. It doesn't.
Water's still a benchmark thing, though. We talk so much about
that's right.
How's the new water?
And Wave Race was that thing for a little while. Also, I grew up around jet skis because my dad loved that, and my grandfather used to race boats.
My rich uncle gave us access to jet ski technology as well.
Yeah. So Wave Race was a little bit also like a thing our family connected to. And not those jet skis and that, which are much more dangerous, more like Sea-Doos, but it was fun. So this represents the, my God, it looks so real moment in video games for me. Those are my number 6. Now, sir, it's your 6.
Yeah, I also, we call it I love that more and more people don't even know this reference, but I call it the Beatles exclusion. There was a time where you'd go, who's your favorite band? But don't say the Beatles because that's stupid. Or like everyone knows they're objectively very good or whatever. So mine for that are Mario 64. It captured me as well. It's an game, of course. We've done a whole episode about it. And Final Fantasy VII. I think a lot of people share the experience. Okay. When I saw the cutscene of that swooping shot going into Midgard and Aerith with the flowers, I was like, we've done it. CG has reached its theoretical maximum where it's photorealistic. Yeah. It really looked photorealistic to me is my memory.
Yeah.
So weird. Anyway, my number... Daddy, please help me.
7? You're number 6.
Fuck! My number 6. We've entered point-and-click territory. So all I want to say as pertains to my taste is I think you're going to see for the rest of the list my involvement with story and my captivation by story, of course, even to the neglect of gameplay. Not that the gameplay is bad, but is less important than the story or is in service of the story. Adam's right on. Meta stuff is going to start intriguing me more and more. And we've entered a point and click thing. And it's amazing to me that point and click seems to be coming back in a real way, including 3D point and click. So like there's traditional point and click, which is usually like a matte painting essentially with characters walking around. And those are coming back too. Kentucky Route Zero, Disco Elysium, blah, blah. Of course, LucasArts, it's sort of like Spielberg had that period where he fucked with animation. George Lucas had this period where he pumped out a bunch of video games that people who loved them love, and then they stopped. And people sort of stopped making that kind of game for 20 years. And now they're back, including 3D ones, by which I mean things like Road 96, where you walk around and pick up stuff. It's basically anything where, you're just interacting. Like Telltale would also do this. You walk around, you pick up stuff, you plug it into other stuff, you talk to people, blah, blah, blah. I love that shit, and we're going to get 3 in a row now. The first one is
great.
Also FMV, captured and put into fake environments a la Mortal Kombat. That was a big trend at the time. Once Mortal Kombat sort of proved you could do it. Pit Fighter is also that. Wrath of the Gods. Now, for me... Yep. This one stands in. You're aware of this? I thought
I'm aware of it.
Okay.
Yep.
This one stands in for me for all educational games. It was a big deal that my elementary school had a computer and that they let us play games. And a lot of those games were formative for me. I remember The Incredible Machine. I remember Number Muncher. I remember
Oregon Trail.
Mario Teaches Typing, Oregon Trail, of course. Making my own games using hypercard stacks.
I did that too.
So formative to me. Kid pics, my heart is swelling with, a child gel, Cosmic Osmo, all this shit. So Wrath of the Gods stands in for those, but also it was a fully accomplished point and click that walked you through Greek myths with real actors playing the characters. So like Zeus was a goofy, low-rent guy in a fake beard. And it was both hilarious, but also genuinely educational in the sense that learning myths is educational, if you think it is. And oh my God, when you got, because of course there's a sign-up sheet and you had to earn merits to do it and shit. It's elementary school. But when you had your 5 stars or whatever and you traded it in for an hour of me and my buddy Griffin sitting there and playing Wrath of the Gods, that was like more fun than recess. Like, I didn't have a computer at home. Getting to play a video game for an hour was everything.
That's right.
So that stands in for that experience. And now I'm going to my number 5. 4, 3.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
5. Another point and click, no big surprise. When I got a little bit older and I had my own console, it was a Sega CD. I fell in love with and played over and over The Adventures of Willie Beamish, which we will never cover because I played it on emulator, and what a bad game. The point and click logic is weak and simple, the dialogue and blah, 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 blah. But here's the thing. It was fully cell animated, and it had the feeling of a Saturday morning cartoon that you could point and click, like play. And it started my love of unusual art styles and realizing that the medium of video game was not synonymous with polygons and textures shaped like a thing. I did not know it could be a cartoon. And it's your basic Saturday morning cartoon. It's basically a ripoff of The Wiz. Willie Beamish is a savant at this Tetris game. It also introduced me to mini games. So for one, the load screen was so long that if you held down the start button, you could play a mini game while you waited for the next sequence to load. That blew my mind. Also, Willie could go into his room and click play video game, and you could play this Tetris game that he was an adept at. And it was The Wiz, if you've heard of that. You had to sneak out and earn the money to get to a video game tournament and win the day. And I think you end up saving the town from an evil developer, and your friend is like a frog in a jar. But my point is, I'm done talking about Willie Beamish. That was it. Oh no, well, there's a good anecdote, which is that I may have told it before, but people jump in and out. I called a 900 number to get an answer that I was stuck on, like what to do with the frog at this certain juncture. And it was literally a 900 pay number that you call, and it goes,
incredible.
Are you at Willie's house? Press 1. Are you outside in the yard? Press 2. And I had to wait till, because it was like hours through the game, right? And it's charging you by the minute. So I went through.
Oh,
and
you
finally
can't
it's
skip.
like, no. And it's like, if you need to know about the frog at the very end, press 91. And it did it. And I didn't understand what I was doing, but a phone bill came for like $300 and my parents were furious. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
They should have just bought you a guide for that.
That's true.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that leads to, I believe, number 5 for me.
Does it, or is it break time?
No, it's not. We should break before 3, I want to say.
You know your shit, man.
Okay, I try to stay on top of it. Number 5 for the old bear is a game that we've almost covered about 8 times, but never quite covered it, and that is TIE Fighter, also a LucasArts game. TIE Fighter, which was a space flight simulator. It is the only PC game I played that wasn't, except that and StarCraft, are the only PC games I played before I legitimately bought a PC last year. So, like, it's one of the only ones. I saw it at a friend's house, and I was like, I have to play that because I was a huge Star Wars fan as a kid. And I purchased a joystick for it and all the expansions for it. And it's still one of my favorite games, even though it is very clunky now. And all it is, friends, is, going on missions as a TIE fighter. TIE fighters are ships without shields. You get blasted to pieces pretty quickly. And it's a lot of managing keyboards and sitting around waiting for objectives to be accomplished and stuff. And it just tickled right in that sort of imaginary place that Star Wars evoked before it was too corporate and lame. Where it was like, man, this is what it would be like to be in Star Wars. It's my favorite it's my favorite movie adaptation game, I think. Meaning like a game that came from the movies. It's my favorite one. I've never gotten into a different flight simulator, but I completely understand the appeal of it. You really do feel like at home, and you feel more emotionally invested in just like the mechanical piece of flying in video games than you ever could any other way other than actually doing it. So, video games are really good at allowing mechanical things to feel meaningful and fun if they're properly balanced and deployed. And TIE Fighter was fixing some of those problems from X-Wing, and it was fantastic. It's a little bit easier to play now that I'm older because I'm used to using joysticks more, and I wasn't then, so it was a lot more unwieldy then. But I just loved it. I just loved it. I wish there were more games like it that were as impactful for me, but I have not carried on with this series. That's my number 5.
Also, you got to be Dark Side, of course, which has some cool factor.
There's something cool about it. Yeah,
we only haven't covered it. Well, we will because I bought it now.
Just time.
Because it talk about an unsupported genre for the most part. I know Flight Sim,
pretty much.
Microsoft Flight Sim exists and actually got like Game of the Year or some shit. But it's been so difficult for me to get the stick to work with my computer, to work with the emulator, to work with the software, to unlock the game in the way that we want to cover it. But we'll get there. And I guess
also just a lot of
go ahead.
I was going to say a lot of love out there to the people who love this game so much that they have continued to update its visuals so that you can play it in a pretty modern looking way. Like, it looks pretty up to date now. Which is amazing because that's just a thing that fans are doing for it. And, God bless those people. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, the Star Wars one for me was the one in the arcade that had the stick where you would shoot, and then you would lightsaber fight Vader. Remember that?
I do.
It was my first game.
It was great.
I paid $1 for instead of 50 cents. Yeah.
Wasn't it like huge? It was like a huge cabinet.
It was a giant
too, right?
cabinet, which is normal now, but it was one of the first really big ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one was cool.
1, 2,
yeah,
3.
I believe I have one more, sir.
Oh, God.
I know.
I thought I had it on lock this time.
It's okay. But I believe I have number 4 now, sir, and then it'll be your number 4. Okay, number 4. Number 4. This one is going to be very obvious the minute that I name it, and it is BioShock. BioShock is, I think, the first time that I played a video game that had a really profound, enriching story that didn't just feel like a fantasy story or like a story about magic or even like an epic tale, but had a really profound, satirical, intelligent story that met me where I was. I love BioShock. I think it's one of the greatest games ever made. And if you want to hear more about us talking about that game, we've done a full episode on it, so I won't do another mini episode here. But BioShock is my number 4.
Is what year did BioShock come out? The first
2007.
One? It feels a little modern for the list, but that's not a requirement of the list. That's just not the way I went, you know?
I also didn't really play a lot of story games until I was a younger adult.
So something's got to represent that, sure.
Yeah. And I to me, BioShock was probably the last time that I played a game that blew my mind about what a story could be. Not the best story I've ever played, but also just I just didn't know what I was getting into when I started that game. Everyone was just like, "Yeah, you should play it. It's cool." That's all I knew about it.
Moments where your tastes evolve as an adult are totally valid and even more to be sought after, because oftentimes once you're out of childhood, it's hard to change your taste. So, yeah, good pick. My number 4. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So this is a game that's a perfect storm of Swaim elements in a way probably no game has been since. And I'm just like grateful to God that it existed. It's I can't believe it existed in a way. It's so hard to find. It features the voices of Jim Belushi, Christopher Reeve, Tress MacNeille, Steven Tyler, and Joe Perry of Aerosmith, and Cher. Wow. It was produced by Robert De Niro. And it is a point-and-click adventure, and it is based entirely on the art of Mark Ryden, who is one of my favorite artists of all time. I'm a big surrealist art fan. Mark Ryden, if you just search his name, Ryden, does surrealism that if you're into surrealism, you go, oh, that guy. Yeah. A very distinctive style and captivating, bizarre. So a big thing about my dad is he is a pop culture fiend and liked weird stuff, which is how I became that way as well. So poking around in his bookshelf, we would, even too young arguably, find weird shit like H.R. Giger art of highly sexualized skeletons and stuff. And of course, captured my imagination, right? This weird dark stuff that I did is so interesting. And I became fixated with surrealism and darkness for the rest of my life. I still am. Cronenberg and Lynch and anything that creeps me out in that disturbing way. And Mark Ryden does that. And the game is called 9, The Last Resort. And,
sounds awesome.
It's
sounds
really
rad.
awesome.
Okay.
Hard to find, hard to play. I suggest at least watching a playthrough because it's a basic point-and-click adventure, but just with the weirdest elements you could encounter. And Cher is the narrator, and she's incredible. And it's the first game I ever played where the PC box came, and inside there was literally like a deed, like a will, like your uncle had died, and here's the physical will to the last resort, which you're inheriting. And you had to decode the will to get the copyright code in order to play the game. So you had to solve a puzzle to play the game or you were barred from playing the game. And that was also very meta and interesting to me. 9.
Sounds amazing.
Just the number 9. Yeah.
These are the kind of games I wish I had played when I was younger. Like I didn't have access to the macabre and the dark fantasy stuff as a kid because my conservative upbringing. So I kind of missed out on that. Like I'm not as intrigued by that as you are.
I'm intrigued by stuff that makes me feel weird and gross, like Stinky Cheese Man and Other Tales.
Yeah.
And
yeah. It's interesting.
Kids stuff that feels more adult than it should, but just because of the texture, not because they're saying anything bad. It just feels gross. Like
do you count Ren and Stimpy?
As a kid, I did. I've grown out of liking it. Also, John Kay is a creep, but yeah. But not just that. I'm like, it's like a rote kind of gross. But at the time, I was obsessed with the close-up shots of the gross, the horse.
Yeah, they
like,
love that shit.
The nipples and shit. Where you're like, as a kid, you're like, well, there's nothing wrong with nipples. People have nipples. You're allowed to reference nipples. It just makes adults uncomfortable. That's what's great about it.
It felt like you were getting away with something when you're watching that show, for sure.
And that carries through in I'm the indie guy here, and I'm obsessed with Shiny, the company that did like Sacrifice, Messiah,
Right.
all these weird games, and I'm obsessed with their modern day equivalent, Devolver Digital, and just weird indie games. I bring that energy. Speaking of,
Your
actually,
number
I
3.
don't think this was too indie, but my number 3 is a game that's appeared on a previous list. I mentioned the companion from this game as one of the most moving companions to me. I cried when he passed, even though he like passes in glory and they fade to his tomb being honored by his descendants. I still cried. I've mentioned Griffin Rowell because he was my best friend all through childhood, and he was definitely there, and he teared up too, no matter what he says. It's a duo of games. We've moved into platformer territory, which the rest of my are. And so I just want to say a piece about that, which is platformer like point and click is I just like game. It's to me, it's the setup for the modern just adventure game. Like I don't mean the heaviness of the plot of The Last of Us, but I mean like, you know, you walk around an environment, you interact with stuff, and the story unfolds, which is a huge bucket that lots of games with various deviations fall into. And to me, back in the day, before you could simulate Assassin's Creed, before you could simulate walking around a world and talking to 1,000 people, other than JRPGs, which is why I loved them more at the time, because they were the richest, biggest, fullest world you had. The dominant staple of how you interpreted just a straightforward story was platformer. Would you agree with that? Like they sit down to do a Star Wars knockoff or an X-Men or an Avengers, and they're like, it'll be like a platformer, maybe with variations, like they punch and kick. Okay, now it's a beat 'em up. They shoot guns. Okay, now it's a shooter. But you're walking left to right on platforms doing stuff. So all the rest of mine are platformers, and to me, they represent that bucket of just general games that appealed to me. Blah, blah, blah. It's Another World, sometimes called Out of This World, and its follow-up, Heart of the Alien. Again, extremely unique look, vibe that is weirdly sad and melancholy, all the elements that Mike likes. It would be higher, except it's fucking so difficult, frustratingly difficult, and clunky to control. But the story is told without any dialogue and is deeply moving. It reminds me of nothing so much as Inside.
Wow.
And for being such an early game, I played it again on the Sega CD. To give me Inside vibes is huge. To make me love a companion without dialogue and then have them die and I cry, huge. Accomplished a lot. And the look, I just recommend Googling it. Same company also did a game called Flashback. It was almost the primitive version of cell shading, but I kind of like it more than cell shading. I wish games still looked like that.
I've never seen this game, so I'm gonna have to look into it.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome. All right, number 3. 3 left.
Three big radishes.
I gotta be careful. Okay, number 3 is a game we've never covered, but I think we should someday. A game that is still being emulated in different ways, most recently even in Callisto Protocol, and that game is Punch-Out!, or as I often call it, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, because that's what it was when I had it. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Is a boxing game. For those of you who've never played it, the character you play, Little Mac, is in Smash Brothers. But essentially, you're just like a regular boxer working your way through an extremely racist series of circuits where you're boxing a boxer and you move on to get to the championship round. And at the end of the game, you fight a person who becomes Mr. Dream. That's the name that they settled on. But he was clearly Mike Tyson. That's who he's supposed to be. And then Mike Tyson got in some legal trouble. And so they tried to distance themselves from him. They are not the only game to have done that, by the way. Street Fighter 2 also did that.
Distance themselves from Mike Tyson?
Yeah, the character Balrog was supposed to be M. Bison.
Oh.
Yeah, they switched the names and stuff. Like Mike Tyson was a huge figure in pop culture.
Right.
Anyway, and if you ever want to see why, go watch some of his knockout videos. They'll blow your mind. But anyway, so the fun of boxing against Mike Tyson aside, the cool thing about this game, and the reason it's still replayable, although it is heinously racist, I no excusing it, it's awful for that. But basically every fight is a puzzle. And it's one of the first games that I played that really did that. It's not about button mashing or even skill. Like, it's not a skill-based game like, say, a Madden or something, or calling the right plays. It's about basically figuring out what is the order of buttons required in order to knock this guy down, right? And so many games ultimately boil down to this kind of very simple puzzle, where it's like, what inputs do I have to do in order to get past this guardian or whatnot, right? A lot of games have sort of settled into it's just combat and it's a combat loop and you master that loop. That's not what Punch-Out does. Punch-Out, every single fight is a little tiny mystery. It's also a little bit funny, and funny in a way that my sensibility appreciated. And it was hard enough that it challenged you as a kid, but not so hard that you needed to go buy a strategy guide for it. Like, it was actually fun figuring out what is the thing I need to do to, Soda Popinski or whatever. So it was an early game that established what video games generally do, which is create fun little puzzles and challenge me at exactly the level I wanted to be challenged as a kid, to feel rewarding when I succeeded. So that's it. They call it Punch-Out now. If you haven't played it, I guess I recommend it for the fun factor, but please bear in mind it is incredibly racist and stereotypical. Have you played this one, Mike?
Yes, Adam. So you're saying what formed your taste is a simulator where you punch ethnic stereotypes in the face in sequence. They just line them up for you. Yeah. Yes, I played it. I totally get what your reasoning. Yeah. I hate this game. I even as a kid, I'm like, so not fun to play. And then someone tells you, oh, it's because for this guy you do this, for this guy you do this. I'm like, well, then it's nothing. It's a key and a lock. And I did it and I beat it immediately. I'm like, oh, okay. Wait, so it's just there's one thing you do and that's all it is? This is not a game. It's like a puzzle box and that's all it is. I don't know.
That's all most games are.
As a kid, I hated it.
Wow. That's weird because you love puzzles.
Well, there's no story. And I find boxing repugnant.
Okay. All right. I understand that. So, like, the action you're simulating is also not fun for you. Okay. That makes sense to me. I mean, as a kid, I, of course, wasn't keyed in on what it was saying. So it didn't trouble me as much. We didn't really watch boxing in my house, but I guess Mike Tyson was such a big figure that
it's more that it was punching seems angry. I feared confrontation to a neurotic degree as a kid. So the fact that punching was inherently an act of anger or violence, just like would be something I wouldn't like. Like I said, like my dad played an Offspring CD in the house, and I started sobbing and ran out of the house and accused him of like
violating your propriety.
I was like, we don't listen to punk. Yeah, that's
you know what, Dad? You got to keep me separated from this.
I was a weird kid. We were watching the piano at my uncle's house, and when Harvey Keitel's dick is shown, I started sobbing. It was like, you're ruining our childhoods.
Wow. and yet you're looking
Harvey Keitel's penis.
Giger. You're looking at Giger paintings.
But that's secretly. See, that's the paradox of that, right? That I would sneak out at night and seek out because my dad told me don't look at that.
Yeah. So I guess what I'll say is, again, no excusing the racism, but the violence of this game is very cartoonish. It's like, it's fun.
Don't worry, dude. I got you covered.
Okay,
Wait
great.
to hear my number one. So.
Oh, I'm so excited. Well, let me hit my number
Song
2.
of the South. Oh, I fucked up again. That's crazy how many times I'm genuinely not understanding.
I just think it's because you're so excited to go.
Sure.
Number 2. This is a stand-in for basically any game that's about playing with your friends. But I think no game has ever been more fun for me to play with my friends than Super Smash Bros. Melee. Melee was a game that a friend of mine had in college, and we would all pile into his dorm room and play it. I had it, and my brother and I used to play it endlessly. Also, it's the first like nostalgic thing I ever got into because Smash Brothers has always been about peddling nostalgia. And fighting games are generally fun, but I think diffusing the ferociousness of actually beating up your friend by it being sort of cartoonified and gamified this way makes it less like you get less angry when you lose. You know, like it's a little like, and there's so much like random chaos that it kind of diffuses the frustration that fighting games can create. And Smash Brothers is a thing to this day. If I get 4 friends together and somebody's like, let's play Smash Brothers, I'm in. I just think it's pure distilled, perfect game design. I think Smash Brothers Ultimate is one of the best games ever made. In that it is a distilled version of Smash Brothers, one of the best games ever made. Also, clearly, I love violence and competing with my friends. So Smash Brothers is a perfect, acceptable version of that for me. That's my number 2.
Yeah, so 2, GoldenEye and Melee are the 2 like that took up 3, 4, 5 years of play.
Yep.
With friends, and they were the epitome. Like, those were the things I played with my friends. That basically covers the whole of my multiplayer childhood. GoldenEye for a bunch of years, and then we got into Melee, and that lasted through college.
Mario Kart 2, right?
My dorm was robbed once. The only N64 cartridge they stole out of dozens was Smash Brothers Melee.
Of course.
Everyone at college in our generation was playing that in the dorm. Like, everyone. There were Melee tournaments held weekly, at every campus on college. So, huge. I didn't include those because of the thing we talked about, but also because I don't find that it actually informed my taste. I always have felt it started as a corporatized cash grab, which is not bad because it's still brilliant gameplay, but it's not like there's a bunch of, like, I don't play any other Melee type games or even say, oh, that game moved me. You know what I mean? And ditto GoldenEye. So they didn't shape my taste as much as they're very fun games.
Here's where I would... Here's the thing about it that I think is taste forming. The first is, I think that it's a perfect distillation of the emotions of fighting games and just competition in general without creating frustration. Like, they've eliminated frustration as much as you can.
Oh, except for edge guarding.
Well, that's a shitty... You're right. But also, there's people, like, I think we've all sort of created a little bit of a rule about that, right?
Or the Donkey Kong suicide.
But, like, I think
fun.
the feeling of the sudden explosion that causes you to soar off the stage is amazing. It's amazing. And it's
dude,
like,
when you get someone with the home run bat, you would always stand up and
it's
go,
so good. Right. And, like, that is a fundamental experience in entertainment. Yeah. Like the creation
Team Rocket
of
blasting off again.
Yeah, like I have a friend who was an editor and works. So I guess there's no way to make this not sound douchey. So I have a friend who edited Creed 2, or Creed 1, excuse me. So he was telling me about the experience that they had when Creed was being tested, and when the music hits at the very end, like after. All the sort of emotional stuff has happened and like we're in the final fight, and there's the moment that the actual Rocky soundtrack hits, and he said, and this before I'd watched the movie, he said when that music hit in the test theater, people stood up and cheered. And I thought, yeah, he sounds like you're bragging. And then I saw the movie and I completely understood what he meant. That is the goal in entertainment. Like, that's the goal. And you and I work in entertainment. And
there's like 3 or 4 different ones you can go for, but that's one.
That's one of the goals, right? That's one of the goals. And Smash Brothers is so good at delivering it. It's so good at delivering it. Yeah.
I mean, if you doubt that, look at the mimetic Mega Man.
Yes.
Smash Brothers
It's so
video.
good. Smash Brothers delivers entertainment in this such a raw, exhilarating way, and I'm constantly trying to figure out what would it take to deliver that in a film.
Totally speaks to your taste.
Yeah,
you like the immediacy of entertainment.
I do.
I like the cerebral nature of thinking about it for a long time afterwards.
I like that
we
too,
both
but more. Yeah.
I was saying we both overlap, but yeah, I'm generalizing.
Yeah,
my number 2.
Your number 2.
Game I mentioned many times. This was my Mario. I'm playing through it again right now, and I'm loving it. I just really like Kid Chameleon, man.
You love that game so much.
It's so great.
Wow.
It has over 100 levels. There's so many different ways to navigate the levels that I'm still discovering, new secret hidden levels in between levels that I've never played. It's like every level had secrets baked in. And like Mario, it is a random cavalcade of nonsense. Like, you get different masks and they make you like Jason who throws axes, or now you're a pink tornado man.
Right.
Now you're a guy with a vacuum cleaner none of it is anything cohesive. Your enemies are random nonsense like giant heads on skewers that spit fireballs at you. But I loved whoever made it was just a fucking weirdo. The nonsense is really weird and cool to me. The game is fun, super challenging, but not indomitable. The cover art of Kid Chameleon, and this is how you know I'm on a nostalgia trip, but I look at it for hours. I love the box art for Kid Chameleon, and I legitimately play the soundtrack like it's an album. It's in heavy rotation. The soundtrack fucking rips. I rap to it. It's incredible. So in those ways, I think it stands up to Mario. Like Mario also has that incredible sound and blah, 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 blah. I don't think Sonic is Sega's Mario. I think Kid Chameleon was, and I actually think it's a pretty
or could have been. Yeah.
Counter to Mario that didn't go where it needed to go, but Kid Chameleon rules.
Yeah, that fundamental loop is a thing that Mario was doing, but taken much further and more creatively.
You pick up power-ups and they give you different powers. If you get hit, you lose them.
Yeah, Mario 3 is the game where they really went for that. Like, they went for it on that front. But I feel like Kid Chameleon felt less bound to... I guess reality is a word that doesn't make any sense to apply here, but it's less grounded, right? Like, would you agree with that? It's a less grounded take.
Than Mario?
Yeah.
I would say both are equally nonsensical.
Okay.
Because they just have a simple framing device, save the princess from in Mushroom Kingdom, and versus you got sucked into a video game, so now you're whatever can happen. And then it's a bunch of random, right? Like you get a feather, you pick up a feather, and it makes you a raccoon who can fly by wagging his tail.
I agree. Yeah.
None of the stuff is cohesive. That's all I'm saying. All right, so
number one, right?
I won't caveat it.
Okay.
I guess by nature it's a caveat. Never mind. And saying I won't caveat it as a caveat, so it's already been done.
Ooh, self-refuted.
So since the seal is broken, I'll just reiterate that this one totally counterbalances the shit I gave you for Punch-Out.
Okay.
Well, I'll say the game first.
Okay.
And then we'll get into it. My number one choice shaped my taste more than any other game. Felt like a Swaim game, arguably even more than 9 The Last Resort in terms of like couldn't exist. It was made just for, can't believe it was made just for me, is Skullmonkeys, which is also a platformer technically.
Okay, sure.
Skullmonkeys is a pretty obscure PlayStation 1 game. It is claymation, which is only a couple games are that. There was Clay Fighter, which if you play that, it sucks ass. The claymation has no love.
It's not great.
They transition between moves in a minimum number of frames. The hitboxes are sloppy.
Yeah.
It was just a novelty gimmick type game. Skullmonkeys is proof of concept of how a claymation game could actually be tight enough to play and like, like a real game. It was a claymation platformer that felt real. And furthermore, it's the exact kind of weirdness. It looks exactly like the art style I draw in. It's kind of reminiscent of Jim Mahfood, one of my favorite, Samuel Heedy, my favorite artists. And it's weird in the exact kind of uncomfortable, grimy, a little gentler than Ren and Stimpy, but for shorthand we'll say like the Ren and Stimpy effect we were talking about,
all right,
which endlessly fascinates me. And the reason I say the political stuff is, so it was made by Doug TeNapel. There's a couple other games in that vein, Armacrog, Neverhood, which were point-and-click adventures, but I found them just not too dry to get into, just exercises in pretty claymation, which is still good. But Skullmonkeys was funny. It had a soundtrack that included lyrics that were parody songs that were funny. It had all kinds of meta jokes. It had you like finding pot leaves and getting high and like all this weird shit. Eating beans by stuffing them into your eye sockets. All just bizarre off the wall kid humor that is like too adult and weird. Looks so stylish, blah, blah, blah. And I bring this up only because I love Doug TeNapel's. Doug TeNapel's probably the most formative artist for me through this whole period. Yeah. Because for the longest time I wanted to be a comic book artist. Doug TeNapel's the creator of Earthworm Jim. But he also released a different graphic novel every year or two at this time. And they were everything to me. Like I grew up going to Comic-Con every year, and every year I would say hi to him and he knew me eventually. We would hug and shit. And all my Doug TeNapel's are signed. Anyway, lo and behold, Twitter comes along, and I'm like, oh, Doug TenNapel, and I follow him on Twitter, and it turns out, God, I wouldn't call anyone a piece of shit. Everyone's human and has inherent worth, but he spews the kind of ignorant meanness that makes me sad, that makes me breaks my heart. And it's astounding because his books scrupulously, he must know that it would ruin him, right? You would never know that from his work.
He's a
and I didn't know it
Breitbart
for many years.
He's a Breitbart contributor too.
So I don't know where I land on separating the art from the artwork, but if we're talking honestly about what was formative, Doug TenNapel is like my art spirit animal, and Earthworm Jim was the coolest, most iconic thing to me ever, above Sonic, above Mario, and even above that was how weird and cool Skullmonkeys was, because I'm also a huge fan of stop motion and claymation, and I just think he's creative beyond belief, despite being just one of the worst, meanest people whose public persona I read.
Yeah, he's got an incredible list of things.
He believes we've DM'd about it at length.
Yeah.
He talked about how him and Gary Sinise were sitting around discussing how being white and Christian is actually stealthily the most underprivileged, opposed class in society.
Well,
and he
yeah,
should be really famous. He should be way more famous based on how creative he is, but he can't catch a break because he's a white Christian in modern society. And I'm like, but you're the executive producer of a TV show currently, and you created Earthworm Jim, and you're friends with Gary fucking Sinise. And he was complaining about that? He's Gary Sinise. You're both, what the fuck are you talking about anyway? I got into a big fight with him over DM, but I love his art so much.
Wow. What a painful, I'm so sorry. That's a sad story.
It's true though. It's incredible. Look at Skullmonkeys.
Oh no, I played Earthworm Jim. In fact, my grandma bought me the first Earthworm Jim video game. I played it the shit out of it. I know this guy. Yeah, I know this guy's work.
Dude, his comic Gear is a work of artistic genius.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, from 1998. I'm just looking at all this stuff. I mean, I'm not going to bother saying anything about him other than
it's a whole
that's a
episode,
disappointment,
my friend.
Yeah, that's a disappointment. But it is really interesting.
There's a whole Hogwarts episode hidden in there.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
The episode that shall never be. I mean, you and I have the discussions about art and artist all the time, and
well, we're monsters, but we would like to think that people will enjoy our shit, you know?
Well, you say that, and haha, of course, but everybody, we have to live with some amount of human fallibility for everybody. I just think he's way, way, way past the line for that. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense. I just don't think he. What's interesting to me about it is that you have such a personal relationship with him, which most of us never get with the artists that disappoint us. Yeah, and that he felt in some way obligated to continue a conversation with you is also interesting.
Oh, dude. Sorry, I got to mention the...
No, sure.
I got him. It was so good. The End of Creature Tech, one of my favorite books of his, is a guy coming to faith, coming to Christianity.
Right.
But he says, he looks around and he says, the world is no different. The evidence hasn't changed. I've changed. And that's the last panel is him saying, I've changed, and looking at a little gecko on his hand. And Doug TenNapel posted a tweet about oh, you think your gender is whatever and it is innate to you?
No.
Well, my hatred of that was put here by God, and it will never change. That's how it is. And it's always a sin, and that won't change. And I just posted that panel and was like, it's like you don't read your own comics. And I posted, the evidence is the same, but I've changed. And he wrote me we got into a big argument.
Really? Did he know who you were when you posted
And I said
it?
who I was, and he's like, oh, yeah, I remember you.
I'm sad to hear this. I'm sad that he's misrepresented Christianity this way. That makes me sad.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Iron West. Anyway, he's done a lot of good.
I'm
comics.
also
Black
sad.
Cherry.
Yeah, I'm sad for anybody who is disappointed by the person behind their work. I don't know. That just makes me sad because it's a seemingly endless problem for all of us, I guess. Well, I'm going to move on to my number one if I can, sir. Just so this episode's not 2 hours. So,
well, you're not going to like what I'm going to do at the end, but go ahead.
Oh, God. Well, it's okay. I don't have to like everything. My number one is going to be the least surprising entry on this list. I bet Mike could even guess it.
Please
go ahead.
Destiny 2 Lightfall,
No.
like the most recent one.
That would be incredible, but you weren't far off because the correct answer is Halo Combat Evolved.
Combat Evolved, sure.
Halo, and I'll tell you why. It's
Bungie, they do good work.
Yeah, I love first-person shooters. This was the first one I really got into. I had never seen Alien or Aliens when this game came out, so some of the concepts here were like, wow. Admittedly, they were borrowed. This was just a fantastic game in every way. I had some great friends who we would have LAN parties basically and string up together a bunch of consoles in a room. We'd have like 4 TVs, 4 consoles, 8 dudes in a room. And it was awesome, man. I had some of the best times of my life in video games playing Halo. I love the story still of this game, not the whole franchise, but this game. I love the story. And, I've just never been more satisfied in a video game with like the blood pumping. This is fucking awesome. That's what this game delivered in every way. Getting in a warthog and driving out while the ship is exploding to the music is still one of my favorite things to do. I've literally done streams where it's like all escapes. We're just doing all escapes today from all the blow-ups in Halo. Because I love it so much. I just think it's great. It's, again, very much the stand and cheer thing, which you're right, Swaim. I do love that.
That's what you're chasing.
Yeah,
Not all
I
the
am.
time,
No,
but a lot.
you're right, though. I do chase the big clap. I do.
Like,
Yeah, I chase that. Yeah, I love that shit. Yeah, you're right. And Halo has a lot of it. Halo has several moments like, oh! At least they were for me when I was, 20 or whatever age I was when this came out. Yeah, very few first-person shooters have satisfied me like this did. Maybe they can't. Some, like BioShock, have expanded what I want out of first-person shooters. But Halo stands apart as being the perfect introduction to this genre, which is one of my 3 or 4 favorites for sure. And I will always treasure the times I had playing it with my friends Tim and Doug and others who spring to mind, but those guys in particular because it was their house. And thanks.
Fuck you, Steve.
But thanks to those guys for, I never owned Halo. But thanks to those guys for letting me come over and play 20 hours of Halo every weekend,
Major.
Yeah, great guys and great times, and it's what I think video games should be about. That's my list. Now do the thing I hate, Swaymo.
Good times were had by all. If you want to hear a bunch of other podcasts, including us and some of our friends, on a wide variety of topics, head over to patreon.com/smallbeans. But in the interest of brevity,
Okay.
Adam, we don't do topics all the time, and when we
Not
do,
always.
we rarely do nostalgia trips, and it's just media is so important to me that I want to take this opportunity to go down this list of these were all things that I swear were big contenders, like could have made the list, seriously.
Okay.
And I want to know, I started with the most common down to the weirdest, wildest shit with the dumbest names.
Sure.
And I want to know if I want you to be like, played it, heard of it,
Okay.
or no
Oh,
idea.
you're going to embarrass me.
Okay?
All right, here we go.
Played it, heard of it, or no idea.
Okay.
And it's how blessed, looking back, I'm so grateful. I got to play so many different interesting games
You really
from an
did.
early age.
Yeah.
StarCraft.
Of course, love it.
Yeah. Metal Gear Solid.
I've played
Huge for me.
some of it, never finished it. We'll fix that next year.
We should play it. It's
Yeah.
fun as shit. Myst 3 Exile.
I've played Myst 1 a bit. I've played Riven, the sequel to Myst. I've never played Myst 3.
3 was the easiest one, only one I got through on my own brain power, so it felt good.
Okay.
Smash TV.
I believe I've tinkered with that at a friend's house, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah.
Echo the Dolphin.
Yes, I've played that.
Final Fantasy Tactics.
That's
That was
one of them
big.
I haven't played. I've played 1, 2. So 2 is 4, by the way.
It was like the first
1, 2,
XCOM style.
Yeah,
game.
7, 13 I've played, 14 I've played, 15 I've played. Anyway, 10.
Space Quest 1.
Nope. Don't know that one.
When you were just like pixels on a green and tan screen. Oh my God. And there was dehydrated water. You put a drop of water with it explodes and kills the monster. Anyway.
Sure.
Area 51, the light gun game. Area 51.
No. Oh, wait. Was that in the arcades?
Oh, yeah, dude.
I think
Crazy guys in rubber alien costumes popping out from behind barrels.
Yeah.
Dude, light gun games, man. Light gun games were everything, and now they're nothing.
I was trying to think of one that had the bazooka, the Super Nintendo bazooka, because I loved that, but
Lethal Enforcers, too, yeah. You also, you mentioned the game that as kids, we always, in front of our parents, called The Cunt. Because they couldn't, we were like, what do you mean? We're saying the name of the game. Okay, anyway,
my dad would have
Altered
killed
Beast.
me. Oh, of course. Many times.
Okay.
Yeah,
Grim
many times.
Fandango.
Yes, of course.
Baldur's Gate.
Yes. I haven't played it, but I definitely know it.
Remember this shit, dude? Lemmings?
Yes, I do remember Lemmings. Like the whole point of that game was stopping them from murdering themselves, right?
That's right. They want to kill themselves so hard. Sam and Max Hit the Road, which I'm sure we'll cover
aware
someday.
of it. Yeah.
Day of the Tentacle, which I've mentioned before.
Yep.
Sim Ant, the weird black sheep of the Sim City family. MDK, Murder, Death, Kill.
Murder, Death, Kill, yes.
With the giant sniper head.
Yes,
that
I have,
was so cool to me. Full Throttle.
I have played some of that.
Fully animated point and click about biker gangs.
Yes, I've played a little bit of that. I think you can still play that game on Game Pass. I think it's on Game Pass.
I redrew that entire game as a 50-page comic book.
That's
like
amazing.
The plot of it. Eternal Champions, the fighting game. No?
Nope.
Darkstalkers, the fighting game.
Nope.
Bubsy.
Yes, I have played a little bit of Bubsy. Yeah, just a little bit.
The Dig.
Yeah,
the Lucas Spielberg game.
Nope.
Decap Attack, the game where you flew with your feet and you're a mummy that shot skulls out of your chest.
No, sir.
Starship Titanic, the game written by Douglas fucking Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, starring John Cleese and Monty Python people.
No, that's fun.
The Journeyman Project.
Nope.
I really wanted to do this.
We're getting into some weird stuff.
Dude, this is giving some listeners like nostalgia.
Yeah,
joy.
you're going to get comments from people, like the 4 people that know what this is. Yeah.
Penn and Teller's Smoke and Mirrors.
Of course.
Yeah,
Everyone knows the Penn and Teller games.
Bad Mojo, the game where you play as a cockroach.
No. I should know
Spectre
that
Supreme.
one. Nope.
Escape Velocity, I mentioned. Spelunks, I've mentioned. Final Zone, the mech game. Final Zone.
Nope. Didn't play it. Nope. Haven't played that.
Night Trap.
Nope.
The Wacky Rape game.
Is that what it's called? Is that the title of it?
It's just called Night Trap, but it's about scantily clad women getting assaulted by like guys in spandex suits, and you got to stop them.
There was a lot more of that in video games than
my mom
care
confiscated it. She read an article saying you shouldn't let your kids have it. She took it away. Scarab of Ra. Oh, someone out there just came.
I believe. And I'm gonna imagine that happening. Now, I remember the name of that, but I don't know anything about it.
Dust: A Tale of the Wired West.
I remember it. I haven't played it.
Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. Good game.
I believe I've heard of it, but I mean, now, I would think.
We're in the home stretch. I'm hoping to stump you, but we'll see. Wonder Boy in Monster World.
Nope.
Alex Kidd in Miracle World.
Nope.
Completely unrelated franchises.
Okay.
There's no way you'll ever. The Residents present A Bad Day on the Midway.
I feel like you're just making up short story titles now, because
that was a game by
like
the band, by the weird avant-garde band, The Residents. They were like an avant-garde punk band. It was a pack-in video game that came with one of their albums, and I was obsessed with how fucking weird it was. Lodestar: The Legend of Tully Bodine.
Yeah. I feel like Lodestar is one that
I thought you would think that was made up, and then it sounds more made up than any media I've ever encountered. Victor, Vector, and Yando in the Cyberplasm Formulae.
Man, these are ridiculous titles.
All
no,
games that I loved as a kid. I'm done.
Okay, wow. Here are some that I have on a list that I did not include.
Shout outs.
I almost included Legend of Zelda 2, specifically because one of the best friends I had as a kid, and I bonded over that game and the Nintendo Power about that game. And Kung Fu, a game that I just love for the dumb levels.
Is that where you would just walk and you just either punch or kick?
Yeah.
Remember that one where the helicopter would drop guys into hay piles, little stick figures? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I do. Kung Fu
the paper
was like,
airplane game.
Kung Fu was the one that was like I actually think Kung Fu is a contender for the same thing that Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is doing, which is
guys,
it's a very
now we're
light
talking like
proposal.
rudimentary early video games. Yeah,
right. And like Kung Fu, I found to be a little dull ultimately, but it's basically like it's a puzzle in that you have to figure out the order of things you have to do. Yeah. Exactly. All right, we've gone way too long. We've violated our own covenant, so that's it. Hopefully you know exactly who to ignore from now on, or hopefully you've heard the name of a game you haven't heard in 20 years. Either way, we've entertained you to our best degree. Thanks, Swamo, for coming back and joining me for another fun one. See you guys next time.